There's a moment when a person already knows. They might not say it out loud, might argue, might smile, might reassure others, might pretend everything's fine, might even get angry at the people telling them the truth. But inside, they already know. Know they need to leave. Know they need to change their situation. Know they need to protect their family. Know this job is breaking them. Know this relationship stopped healing long ago. It's only hurting now. Know this city is dimming them. Know this life stopped being a home and became a cage. And they stay anyway. That's the strangest part. They can see they're hurting, see the future getting smaller, see themselves closing up inside, see their kids growing up in anxiety, see they're not living anymore, just enduring. And they still say, now's not the right time. Let's wait a bit longer. Where would I even go? What if it's worse there? Everyone else gets by somehow. Maybe it'll sort itself out. I can't just drop everything. And from the outside, you want to say, can't you see what's happening? But they can. That's exactly why this video isn't about stupidity, not about weakness, not about some people being brave while others are cowards, not about people who left, started over, and now feel entitled to judge those who stayed. This video is about something else. Why can a person see the truth and still not move? Why does familiar pain sometimes feel safer than unknown rescue? Why do they hold on to a place that's no longer home? Why do they call fear wisdom, paralysis patience, and attachment to the past loyalty? And this isn't only about relocation, not only about emigration, not only about a city or a country. Sometimes it really is a country or a city. But sometimes it's a marriage, a job, a social circle, a habit, a lifestyle, a church where someone stopped growing long ago, or an inner state they somehow keep calling normal. This is about any moment when life tells a person, move. This can't go on. This place is destroying you. This job is taking your soul. This relationship is turning you into a shadow. And the person hears it and stays, because leaving is frightening. But sometimes staying is more frightening. You just don't realize that until it's too late. 1. A person often stays not because things are good. Picture a regular kitchen late in the evening, a phone on the table, troubling news again. The kids are already asleep. His wife is staring out the window. The man is rereading a message from an acquaintance. You need to make a decision, seriously, while there's still time. He reads it. His jaw tightens. He sets the phone face down and says, let's not panic. Maybe he's right. Sometimes panic really is a bad advisor, but sometimes let's not panic means something else entirely. I'm scared to admit that everything has changed. Now a different scene. A person lives in a city that's slowly draining the life out of them. Gray skies, empty evenings, the feeling that every year looks like the last one. There's money, but no joy. There's work, but no life. They've been saying for years, I don't live here, I survive here. But when the thought of moving comes up, they immediately start defending the place. It's not perfect there either. At least I know what to expect here. I'm used to it. Here's the thing that's important to understand. A person often doesn't stay because the old place is good. They stay because the old place is familiar. And to a frightened mind, familiar often feels safe, even if it's familiar pain. And so they choose not what's good. They choose what's known. And the hardest part, a person can almost make up their mind. In the evening, they open a laptop, look at flights, do the math, message someone in another country or city, browse job listings, save one page, then another. And for a few minutes, something strange stirs inside. What if I actually could? But come morning, they wake up, see the familiar walls, hear the familiar sounds, see the same kitchen, the same yard, the same work ahead. And last night's resolve feels almost naive. Where was I even planning to go? I need to be realistic. Later. Now's not the time. And they close the tabs. Not because they got a new answer, but because the night gave them courage and the morning put them back in the familiar cage. That's why important decisions can't be left to an evening's emotion. They need to become a small, concrete step. Not someday move away, but tomorrow find out what documents I need. Not start a new life, but figure out how much I'd need for the first month. Not change everything, but make one phone call. Because a dream without a next step very quickly turns back into sadness. You can live in a small cage, but when you know every bar of that cage, it starts to feel almost like home. That's why a person stays at a job they hate for years, hates Mondays, hates their boss, comes home empty every evening. But when change comes up, they say, "At least it's stable here." Stable how? Stably bad, stably hopeless, stably going nowhere, but stable. Psychologists call this status quo bias. Simply put, people often choose not what's better, but what's familiar. Not because they've weighed the options, but because change itself feels like a risk. And here's the core question. Am I staying because this is genuinely my path? Or because the new requires trust, and I don't know how to trust anymore? But what comes next is the uncomfortable part. Sometimes a person isn't defending a home, they're defending a cage. 2. A cage doesn't become a cage overnight. If everything had collapsed in a single day, a person might have acted immediately. But life often gets worse not in one blow. It gets worse in layers. Today, things got a little more anxious. Tomorrow, a little more expensive. Then a little less freedom. Then a little more fear. Then people started speaking more quietly. Then things disappeared that used to seem normal. Then the kids started asking questions that were hard to answer. Then the body got used to living in tension. And the person adapts. That's how the mind works. It can get used to almost anything. Sometimes that saves us, but sometimes it destroys us. Because the person stops seeing what's not normal. They start living inside the destruction and calling it regular life. Yesterday they would have said, "It'd never live like this." Today they say, "Well, what else can you do?" That's the terrifying moment. Not when things got bad, but when bad became normal. The most dangerous cage is the one a person got used to gradually. It happens in relationships. First, someone raises their voice. Then they humiliate. Then they apologize. Then they humiliate again. And eventually you stop asking, "Why are they treating me this way?" You ask, "How do I avoid setting them off today?" And that's it. You're inside the cage. It happens at work. A small injustice first, then overwork, then being undervalued. Then you're no longer living. You're constantly proving you have the right to be there. It happens in a city, in a social environment, in a way of life. First, you just don't like the weather. Then you stop going out. Then you stop dreaming. Then you say, "I'm just not a people person." Maybe it's not that. Maybe the environment is slowly dimming you. And one day you realize, I haven't been living for a long time. I'm maintaining a life I no longer have. And here's the honest question. What am I calling normal only because I've been used to it for so long? The most frightening question isn't, why didn't I leave? The most frightening question is, what will I lose if I stay? 3. Fear of loss outweighs the hope of something better. There's another powerful mechanism, fear of loss. Losing what's familiar often hurts more than gaining something better. So when a person thinks about change, they often see not opportunity, but loss. Not, I could find safety, but I'll lose my home. Not, my kids will have a future, but they'll lose their friends. Not, I could start living, but I'll lose my familiar world. The person looks at the door but doesn't see an exit. They see the cost of the exit. Sell the car, leave the house, lose their status, start from zero, become a stranger. And then the old place starts to feel valuable just because it's old, even if it's destroying them. The sunk cost effect is simple. I've already put so much in, so I have to keep going. But past investments aren't always a reason to stay. Sometimes they become chains. The person thinks, I've lived here so many years. I built everything here. My kids were born here. I can't just leave it all behind. And that's completely understandable. You can't dismiss words like that, because they're not holding on to walls. They're holding on to their life, to memories, to years, to faces, to the smell of the stairwell, to the tree by the house, to a past that can't just be packed into a box. But if the ship is sinking, the price of the ticket isn't the main question anymore. The fact that you've invested years doesn't mean you're obligated to invest the rest of your life there. Sometimes wisdom is admitting, yes, my story was here, but my story doesn't have to become my grave. Because leaving almost always looks like betraying the past. But sometimes, a person isn't betraying the past when they leave. Sometimes, they're betraying the future when they stay. The next mechanism is especially dangerous because it looks like loyalty. 4. Bloom where you're planted. Now, let's talk honestly about a phrase. Bloom where you're planted. On the surface, it sounds wise, homey, time-honored, as if a person owes loyalty to the land, the family, the place, the roots. And there might be truth in that. If they're freely choosing to stay, if they're genuinely serving something, if their heart is in responsibility, not fear. If they're not using this phrase to hide exhaustion or inner paralysis, then yes, a person can be in the right place where they were born. But very often, this phrase stops being wisdom and becomes a convenient form of control. They tell you, where would you even go? Your roots are here. Don't go looking for a better life. Everyone else endures, so can you. And it sounds fine on the surface. But when these words are used to keep a person in poverty, in danger, in a place where their kids are losing their future, that's no longer wisdom. Those are words that replace the person's ability to think for themselves. Because a person isn't a tree. They're not obligated to die where they were planted. A tree has no choice. A person has a conscience, has responsibility, has a family, has a calling, has a God who can lead a person not only to where they were born, but to where they're supposed to come alive. Love for a place can be real. The problem doesn't start with love. The problem starts when love becomes a ban on moving. So the question isn't where you were born. The question is different. Where are you supposed to be right now? Before God, before your conscience, before your family, and before the truth? That's a much harder question, because you can't answer it with a phrase. You have to answer it with your life. And now comes the part most people aren't prepared for. The people whole explain your choice to you. This is where things get hard. Because a person isn't only held in place by fear of the new, they're held by people who love them, or say they do. Sometimes out of genuine care, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of envy, sometimes because your step too loudly exposes their own stillness. You haven't left yet, haven't decided anything. You just said, I'm thinking about it. And they respond as if you've committed a crime. 5. The people around you will confuse your motives. They say, I want to leave because I'm scared for my family. And they're told, you just want a better life. They say, I'm thinking about my kids' safety. And they're told, don't hide behind your kids. They say, I can't keep living with this kind of stress. And they're told, everyone else lives with it, so can you. They say, I want to try starting over. And they're told, sure, easy when you have money. And the person starts to doubt. What if they're right? What if I'm actually running away? What if I'm weak? What if I'm betraying something? That's how the people around you can scramble your motives. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. Sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of pain. Sometimes because your step puts their own stillness into question. Because if you can leave, maybe they could have at least considered it. And it's easier to say, you only left because you had money, than to ask, why did I never even start preparing? Easier to say, lucky you, than to admit, you took a risk and I waited for guarantees. That doesn't mean everyone who stayed is bad. No. People have different circumstances. Some are caring for sick parents. Some are tied up with paperwork. Some stay because they have real service, real responsibility, real love there. You can't measure everyone by the same standard. But here's what's important. When a person leaves, those who stayed often build a story about them. And that story exists to protect them from their own question. If they could take a risk without guarantees, what does that say about me? So, if you're taking a hard step, don't expect everyone to understand your motives. Some will judge you not by your conscience, but by their pain. That's hard, especially when it's parents, people close to you, people you were hoping would have your back. But a grown adult can't spend their whole life making decisions just to keep every relative at ease. Sometimes the most responsible decision looks like madness at first, especially to those who've long since started calling the cage home. And here's where many people deceive themselves with noble words. 6. False loyalty and real responsibility. Not every exit is wisdom. Sometimes a person really is running from responsibility, running from hard work, running from the truth about themselves, and saying, I'm just choosing myself. That happens. But the other thing happens too. A person stays and calls it loyalty, when really it's fear. They say, I'm not abandoning my people, but inside, they're terrified of becoming a stranger somewhere new. They say, God will take care of it, but they're not taking a single step, even though the door is already open. They say, this must be my fate. But sometimes it's not fate. Sometimes it's refusal of responsibility dressed in noble words. Real humility isn't passivity. Real faith isn't waiting for everything to resolve without your participation. Sometimes responsibility looks like leaving. Sometimes love looks like moving. Sometimes protecting your family doesn't look like, well, get through it. It looks like we're packing our bags. If you're responsible for children, your question isn't just, where am I more comfortable? Your question is, where will they be safer? Where won't their future keep narrowing? What decision will I be able to explain to my conscience someday? A person isn't obligated to stay where they're being destroyed just to keep others comfortable with their choice. 7. Fear of becoming nobody. One of the deepest reasons a person doesn't move is the fear of losing their old self. Moving isn't just a change of address. It's a blow to identity. You were one of the locals, now you're a stranger. You were an adult, now you're a beginner. You knew the language, now you speak with mistakes. You had status, now you're starting with the basics. You were surrounded by people who knew you, now nobody knows your story. And one of the heaviest moments on a new path is the day you suddenly realize, no one here knows who you were. Nobody knows your past achievements. Nobody knows how much you endured. Nobody knows that once you were a confident person. You're just someone who doesn't quite understand how things work here. You ask obvious questions, make simple mistakes, sound less sure of yourself. Ask for help where you used to be the one helping others. And it breaks your pride. But sometimes that's exactly what's needed. Because the old self might have been more than experience. It might have been armor. And the new path strips away that armor and asks, can I be a person when I no longer have my old status? Many people aren't afraid of moving. They're afraid of being small again. Afraid to admit, I don't know. I need help. I'm going to have to learn. I'm going to have to get through a period when I don't look successful. And if a person is too attached to their image, they'll stay in old pain rather than go through the humiliation of a new beginning. This is about emigration, but also career change, getting out of a destructive relationship, admitting, I've been going in the wrong direction. A new path almost always requires humility, and humility is uncomfortable for pride. Pride says, I have to look strong. Humility says, I need to take the right step, even if I look weak for a while. Pride says, I can't start over. Humility says, better to start over than keep building on a broken foundation. Pride says, what will people say? Humility says, what will my conscience say? And here a person chooses what drives them, the fear of looking like a failure or responsibility to the future. 8. What can I even do? There's a state where a person has almost stopped seeing any way out. They say, I don't have options. I won't make it. I don't have money. I don't know the language. I'm too old. I can't. Some of those reasons might be real. Don't dismiss them. But the question isn't always whether you can do the whole journey right now. The question is whether you can take the first honest step. Not move, but gather information. Not emigrate, but find out what documents you'd need. Not drop everything, but talk to someone who's already done this. Not figure it all out, but stop saying I can't before you've even checked. Learned helplessness is when a person is so used to feeling powerless that they stop checking even the doors that are still open. The window might be open, but the person doesn't walk over to it because they decided long ago there were no doors. Sometimes the very first change isn't buying a ticket. It's being honest enough to say, I don't know if it'll work, but I'm going to start finding out. Helplessness doesn't only live in circumstances. It lives in the repeating thought, nothing's going to change anyway. And the first step often doesn't begin with a suitcase. It begins with refusing to believe that thought without testing it. 9. Why just leave already? Usually doesn't work. If you can see that someone close to you is stuck in a destructive place, you want to shake them. Just go already. Can't you see what's happening? Stop putting up with this. And you might be completely right about the situation. But direct pressure often triggers resistance. The phrase, just leave already, might not free the person. It might push them deeper into their defenses. They start proving to you they'll stay, not because they're sure, but because they don't want to feel controlled. So sometimes it's better not to say, leave. Better to ask, what would have to happen for you to say, this isn't safe anymore? What are you most afraid of losing? And what might you lose if nothing changes? A question sometimes opens a door better than a command, because a question puts responsibility back in the person's hands. And if you're the person who's stuck, ask yourself these questions. Not to spiral into panic, but to finally stop living in the fog. And here's the key distinction. There's a difference between caution and paralysis. 10. Faith isn't a guarantee, it's a step. To leave a place that's destroying you, a person needs more than logic. Logic might have already shown everything. You've done the math, seen the risks, heard the advice, understood that staying is more dangerous, and still not moved. Because at a certain point, a decision requires faith, not blind faith, not reckless faith. Faith is when you've honestly looked at reality, weighed your responsibility, understood there are no guarantees, and you take the right step anyway. Because not taking the step is no longer honest. A person often waits for complete certainty, but faith starts where complete certainty ends. If everything were guaranteed, faith wouldn't be needed. Sometimes God doesn't give you a map of the whole road. He gives you light for the next step. Caution prepares. Paralysis postpones. Caution weighs the risks. Paralysis looks for excuses. Caution says, I'll take the step thoughtfully. Paralysis says, I'll wait until I'm not scared. But that won't come. Important steps are almost always frightening, especially when you're responsible for more than just yourself. 11. This video isn't saying everyone should leave. Let me be very clear. This video isn't saying everyone has to go. There are people who stay out of genuine love, out of service, because they can't leave sick parents, because they genuinely need to be there right now. That's real. But the central question of this conversation isn't leave or stay. It's different. Am I staying out of calling or out of fear? Am I staying out of love or dependence? That's not a question to answer publicly. It's a question for quiet, for prayer, for an honest conversation with your conscience, for a clear-eyed look at your family, your children, your future. Because sometimes a person says, I can't leave, when the truth is, I'm afraid of what leaving will cost. And those are very different things. Not every place you've stayed in is home. Not every stability is a blessing. Not every endurance is loyalty. Not every waiting is wisdom. And not every exit is betrayal. Sometimes leaving is the first honest act of responsibility. Before your family, before your children, before your conscience, before the life you've been entrusted with. I don't know where you are right now. Maybe you don't need to leave. Maybe your right step is a small one. One conversation, one list, one honest calculation, one prayer without self-deception. But maybe you need to stop saying, I can't, before you've even started looking. Sit with this honestly. Write down 2 questions. Where am I staying, even though I've known for a long time that I need to move? And next to it, what's one small step I can take, without panic, but without fooling myself? Sometimes a new path doesn't begin with moving. It begins with honesty, not with a ticket, but with a quiet phrase, Lord, I don't want to live in fear anymore. Show me the truth. Give me wisdom. Give me courage. And help me do what I'm actually responsible for. Take care of your heart. Take care of your family. Until next time.